Stan Lee, born December 28, 1922, he is an American comic book writer, editor, actor, producer, publisher, television personality, and the former president and chairman of Marvel Comics. Lee led the expansion of Marvel Comics from a small division of a published house to a large multimedia corporation. With the help of his uncle, Rob Solomon, Lee became an assistant in 1939 at the new Timely Comics division of Pulp magazine and comic book publisher Martin Goodman's company. Timely, by the 1960s, would evolve into Marvel Comics. Marshalling his childhood ambition to be a writer, young Stanley Lieber made his comic book debut with the text Captain America Fools the Traitor Revenge in Captain America Comics 3, using the pseudonym Stan Lee, which years later he would adopt as his legal name. Lee later explained in his autobiography and in numerous other sources that he had intended to save his given name for more literary work.
December 28th was a very important date for me in the year 1922. That's when I was born, on the west side of Manhattan, on 98th Street and West End Avenue. I'm sorry I can't remember any more about my birth, but the next thing I remember, I was about 5 or 6 years old, and my parents used to like to take photographs of me. They didn't have a camera, but there were always people in the neighborhood, professional photographers. I think you'd pay them a dime at that time, and they would have a little pony with them, and they'd put the little kid on the pony and take this photo and give the photo to the mother. So I seem to remember I had more photos of myself taken on ponies. And she would sometimes dress me in a sailor suit or something and take pictures of me. I think she wanted me to be an actor. I'm not sure.
When Simon and his creative partner Jack Kirby left late in 1941 following a dispute with Goodman, the publisher installed Lee, just under 19 years old, as interim editor. The youngster showed a knack for the business that led him to remain as the comic book division's editor-in-chief, as well as art director for much of that time, until 1972, when he would succeed Goodman as publisher. Lee entered the United States Army in early 1942 and served stateside in the Signal Corps, writing manuals, training films and slogans, and occasionally cartooning. In the mid-50s, by which time the company was now generally known as Atlas Comics, Lee wrote stories in a variety of genres, including romance, westerns, humor, science fiction, medieval adventure, horror, and suspense. By the end of the decade, Lee had become dissatisfied with his career and considered quitting the field. In the late 50s, DC Comics editor Julius Schwartz revived the superhero archetype and experienced a significant success with its updated version of The Flash, and later with the super team, the Justice League of America. In response, publisher Martin Goodman assigned Lee to create a new superhero team. Lee's wife urged him to experiment with stories he preferred, since he was planning on changing careers and had nothing to lose. Lee acted on that advice, giving his superheroes a flawed humanity, a change from the ideal archetypes that were typically written for preteens. Before this, most superheroes were idealistically perfect people with no serious lasting problems. Lee introduced complex, naturalistic characters who could have bad tempers, melancholy fits, and vanity. They bickered amongst themselves, worried about paying their bills and impressing girlfriends, got bored, or even were something physically ill.
When I used to read comics when I was young, I used to feel that the characters weren't believable, they weren't realistic, because they never had any problems. Their only problem was, how can I catch the bad guy? How can I beat the villain? But I used to think to myself, what about their personal life? What kind of people are they? What do they do when they're not chasing the villain? How do they make their money? Are they successful with members of the other sex? What about their family? Where do they live? And so forth. So I made up my mind, if I do any superhero characters, or indeed any characters, I would like to make them three-dimensional so that the reader can see what kind of lives they live, can see what kind of people they really are, and also can see what problems they have, because we all have problems. Whether we worry about allergy attacks or an ingrown toenail or pimples or anything, everybody has things that concern him or her that they worry about. So I wanted to give these people, even though they were heroes, I wanted to give them little personal problems to make them more believable, to make them more like me, because I've got plenty of problems.
The first superhero group Lee and artist Jack Kirby created was the Fantastic Four. The team's immediate popularity led Lee and Marvel's illustrators to produce a cavalcade of new titles. With Kirby primarily, Lee created the Hulk, the Iron Man, the Thor, and the X-Men, with Bill Everett, the Daredevil, and with Steve Ditko, the Doctor Strange, and Marvel's most successful character, the Spider-Man, all of whom lived in a shared universe. Stan Lee's Marvel's revolution extended beyond the characters and storylines to the way in which comic books engage their readership, and it built a sense of community between fans and creators. Lee introduced the practice of including a credit panel on the splash page of each history, naming not just the writer and penciler, but also the inker and letter. Throughout the 60 years, Lee scripted, acted, directed, and edited most of Marvel's series, moderated the letter pages, wrote a monthly column called Stan's Soapbox, and wrote endless promotional copy, often signing off with his trademark phrase Excelsior, which is also the New York State motto. Lee shares co-creator credit with Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko on, respectively, the Fantastic Four and Spider-Man feature film series. Lee also supported composing comic books to provide some measure of social commentary about the real world, often dealing with racism and bigotry. Stan's Soapbox, besides promoting an upcoming comic book project, also addressed the issues of discrimination, intolerance, or prejudice. In later years, Lee became a figurehead and public face for Marvel Comics. He made appearances at comic book conventions around America, lecturing at colleges, and participating in panel discussions. Lee was briefly president of the entire company, but soon stepped down to become publisher instead, finding that being president was too much about numbers and finance, and not enough about the creative process he enjoyed. In the 2000 years, Lee did his first work for DC Comics, launching the Just Imagine series, in which Lee reimagined the DC superheroes like Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman, Green Lantern, and The Flash. In 2006, Marvel commemorated Lee's 65 years with the company by publishing a series of on-shot comics starring Lee himself, meeting and interacting with many of his co-creations, including the Spider-Man, Doctor Strange, the Thing, the Silver Surfer, and the Doctor Doom. Stan Lee Foundation was founded in 2010 to focus on literacy, education, and the arts. Its stated goals include supporting programs and ideas that improve access to literacy resources, as well as promoting diversity, national literacy, culture, and the arts. Lee has had cameo appearances in many films based on Marvel characters that he created or co-created, such as in Spider-Man. He appeared in Spider-Man's first battle with the Green Goblin, pulling a little girl away from falling debris. In Daredevil as a child, Matt Murdock stops Lee from crossing the street and getting hit by a bus.
Hey, Murdoch!
In X-Men The Last Stand, Lee and Chris Claremont appears as two of Jean Grey's neighbors in the opening scene set 20 years ago. Lee, credited as waterhouseman, is watering the lawn when Jean technically redirects the water from the hose in the air. In Spider-Man 3, Lee appears in a role credited as Man in Times Square. He stands next to Peter Parker, both of them reading a news bulletin about Spider-Man, and commenting to Peter that, "You know, I guess one person can make a difference." He then says his catchphrase, "Enough said."
You know, I guess one person can make a difference. Enough said.
In Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, Lee appears as himself at Reed Richards and Susan Storm's first wedding, being turned away by a security guard for not being on the guest list.
Invitation, sir.
I should be on that list.
Name?
Stanley.
Yeah, nice try, buddy.
No,
Nice
no,
try.
really,
Nice
I'm
try.
Stanley.
In Iron Man, Lee, credited as himself, appears at a gala cavorting with three blonde women, where Tony Stark mistakes him for Hugh Hefner, the editor of Playboy magazine.
Hey, Tony. Remember me?
Sure don't. Look great, Hef.
In The Incredible Hulk, Lee appears as a hapless citizen who accidentally ingests a soft drink mixed with Bruce Banner's blood, leading to the discovery of Dr. Banner's location in a bottling plant in Brazil.
Here's something a bit more interesting. It's possible gamma sickness. Milwaukee. A man drank one of those Guarana sodas. Guess it had a little more kick than he was looking for.
Wow.
Thor, Lee appears among many people at the site where Thor's hammer, Mjolnir, lands on Earth. He tears the back of his pickup truck in an attempt to pull Mjolnir out of the ground with a chain and cause everyone to laugh by asking, "Did it work?"
Work?
Lee's favorite authors include Stephen King, H.G. Wells, Mark Twain, Arthur Conan Doyle, William Shakespeare, Charles Dickens, and Harlan Ellison. He is also a fan of the films of Bruce Lee.